The carriage stopped before the gate, and from it stepped a young woman in a simple dress, her heart pounding with nervousness. Claire had come to marry a man she had never seen, but when the butler read her name, he frowned. Before they could send her away, a barefoot whispered like a prayer, "No mistake, Jesus sent you to us." Before we dive into this story, leave your comment with a rating from 1 to 10 and tell us what city you're joining us from. May this moment bring reflection and emotion to your heart. The silence of that afternoon seemed to carry the weight of destiny. The sun, weary of shining, filtered through the low clouds and died over the golden fields of St. Anthony's Ranch, deep in rural Kentucky. The orange light, almost melancholic, tinging the old fences and the still leaves of ancient fig trees with copper, gave the place a dreamlike air, as if time moved slower there than in the rest of the world. Shadows stretched long over the red earth, and the wind carried the scent of dry grass mixed with the sweet perfume of orange blossoms that grew around the main house. The carriage stopped before the wrought iron gate, rusted by time but still imposing. The coachman, a middle-aged man with a face weathered by the sun and a hard life, stepped down first and opened the side door. From it descended a young woman in a modest dress, the fabric grimy with road dust. The dress had once been light blue, but now it looked more gray than anything, stained by hours of travel. Her name was Claire, daughter of humble farmers from a forgotten hollow in the Appalachian Mountains. She had been raised among fields of corn and tobacco, helping her mother with household chores since she was a girl. She had never known luxuries, never known a life other than one of arduous work under the scorching sun. But her mother always told her that God had something special planned for her, that her simple beauty and kind heart would not go unnoticed. And then the letters arrived. A wealthy rancher, they said, was seeking a wife, a good, hard-working man, a widower with a small daughter. Claire's family had in debt after a lost harvest, saw in the proposal a chance at salvation. The dowry offered would pay off all debts and still leave enough to plant for the next season. Claire didn't want to at first. She cried. She begged not to be sent. But her mother, with tears in her eyes, held her hands and said, "My child, sometimes God leads us down paths we don't understand. He always knows what he's doing with faith." And so Claire departed, taking only a small suitcase with a few mended clothes and, in her pocket, a blue ribbon her mother had given her at farewell. "When you miss me," her mother had said, "look at this ribbon and know that my love is with you." Throughout the 3-day journey, Claire prayed. She prayed for her mother, for her ailing father, for her younger siblings. She prayed that the man she was to marry would be, at least, kind. She didn't ask for love. She didn't ask for passion. She only asked that he not be cruel. When the carriage finally stopped before that majestic ranch, Claire's heart pounded. The main house was enormous, painted white, with blue windows, surrounded by well-kept gardens and ancient trees. She had never imagined that her future home would be so insignificant, like an ant before a palace. The coachman took her suitcase and accompanied her to the gate. A foreman with a grizzled mustache and broad shoulders appeared, looked her up and down with a neutral expression, and said, "Are you the young lady who's come to marry?" Claire swallowed hard and, "Yes, sir. My name is Claire Johnson." The foreman nodded and led her to the main entrance. Her steps echoed on the stone flooring. She looked around, marveling. Everything there breathed wealth and tradition, the walls covered with antique wallpaper, the framed portraits of stern ancestors, the heavy mahogany furniture. It was a world completely different from what she knew. When they entered the foyer, the butler appeared. He was a thin man with white hair combed back and an aristocratic bearing. He wore an impeccable black suit and carried an air of natural superiority. He looked at Claire with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. The foreman handed him the letter Claire had brought. "The young lady says she's here for the wedding." The butler unfolded the paper carefully, adjusted his spectacles on his nose, and read in silence. His eyebrows gradually rose, and then he looked up at Claire, confused, "There must be a mistake, my miss," he said, his grave voice echoing through the polished wooden hall. "We are not expecting anyone by that name here. Mr. Arthur Thompson has not ordered any bride." Claire felt the ground give way beneath her. Her heart pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. Her mouth went instantly dry, and a wave of panic surged through her chest. What did he mean? The letters were all there, in her cloth bag. Branch's name, the address, the groom's name, everything checked out. Or so. But there has to be a mistake, she stammered, pulling the letters from her bag with trembling hands. "Look here, sir. All the letters speak of St. Anthony's Ranch. Look at the name. Look at the address." The butler took the letters with delicate fingers and examined each one. His face remained impassive, but there was something worried in his eyes. "Indeed, the address is correct, but the master of this house never sent these letters." Claire felt her legs go weak. Shame began to rise up her neck like a hot wave, coloring her cheeks red. What was she going to do now? Go home without money, face her family after having failed? Tears began to burn her eyes, but she came back with all the strength. However, before the butler could give orders for her to be sent away, a girl appeared from the top of the varnished wooden staircase. Must have been about 10 years. She had long brown hair falling large, expressive, warm brown eyes, bare feet that made little sound. She wore a simple white cotton dress with embroidery on the sleeves. She descended the steps lightly, almost as if floating, moving with the natural grace of children who haven't yet known the world's malice. She approached Claire without fear, without hesitation, if she knew her from somewhere. He stopped right in front of her and observed her with tenderness and curiosity, tilting her head slightly to the side. There was something surprising in those childlike wisdom that didn't match her age. "It's no mistake," she whispered, almost like a prayer, her voice soft but full of certainty. "Jesus sent you to us." The child's murmur made the air tremble. The silence that followed was deep, heavy, full of meaning. The butler swallowed hard, not knowing what to say. The foreman crossed his arms, uncomfortable, looking from Claire to the girl and back, and that's how the mistake turned into a mystery. The rancher appeared shortly after, drawn by the commotion in the foyer. Arthur Thompson was a tall man, with a serene presence that immediately commanded attention. He had broad shoulders, an aristocratic bearing, but without arrogance, and eyes of an impossible blue that seemed to see beyond appearances. His face was marked by lines that suggested experience, and his dark brown hair already showed gray strands, though he couldn't have been more than 35. He wore simple but good quality clothes, beige linen trousers, a white shirt with sleeves rolled up to the elbows, a leather vest. There was dirt under his fingernails and the smell of horses on his clothes. He was not a man who stayed cooped up in offices. He was a true rancher who got his hands dirty. He carried within him the weight of an unspeakable past. He had been a widower for 3 years. His wife, Mary Elizabeth, the servants whispered, had died of a broken heart after losing a newborn son. The baby had lived only 2 hours, enough time to be baptized, but not to be truly known. Mary Elizabeth never recovered. She withered day by day, refusing food, refusing comfort, until a fever took her on a cold June night. Since then, St. Anthony's Ranch had lived under the precise rhythm of Arthur's silences. He worked from sunup to sundown, cared for his daughter with dedication, but rarely smiled. The music that once filled the house had died with his wife. The piano in the living room remained closed, covered by a white cloth, like a tomb. Seeing Claire standing in the foyer, dusty from travel, with the crumpled letter in her trembling hands and eyes red from contained tears, he felt something indecipherable, a mix of curiosity and discomfort. There was something fragile about her, but also something strong. An interesting contradiction. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice grave but not threatening. The butler, always efficient, explained the situation quickly. "This young lady came believing that you summoned her for marriage. There's an error in the letters, sir. She shouldn't be here." Arthur took the letters from the butler's hands and examined them in silence. His eyes scanned each line, each word. Then he looked at Claire, who kept her head bowed, her cheeks still red with shame. "Where are you from?" he asked, not unkindly. "From the Appalachian Mountains, sir," she replied, her voice almost a whisper. "I traveled 3 days. Something in Arthur's chest ached. 3 days of travel to find a mistake. 3 days of hope to find disappointment." He looked at his daughter, who held the hem of Claire's skirt with one hand, as if she had already grown attached to the young woman. Mary Ann looked at her father with those pleading eyes he knew so well. He sighed deeply. "Prepare the room in the east wing," he ordered the butler, without taking his eyes off Claire. "And serve her dinner. She will stay here until we clear up this mess." Foreman didn't approve. He crossed his arms and huffed softly. "Boss, with all due respect, we know nothing about this young lady. It could be dangerous." The housekeeper, Mrs. Euphemia, who had silently emerged from one of the side corridors, as she always did, also disapproved. She was a middle-aged woman, thin, with an angular face and small, vigilant eyes like an eagle's. She always wore a black dress, buttoned up to her neck, and her hair pulled back in a tight— "Mr. Thompson," she said, her voice sugary but with hidden venom, "don't you think it prudent to investigate further before giving shelter to a stranger?" But the girl, Mary Ann, insisted with such sweetness that no one dared cross her. "Daddy, she can stay, can't she? Just until we find out what happened. Please?" Arthur looked at his daughter and saw in her eyes something he hadn't seen in a long time. Hope. He couldn't deny Mary Ann anything. She was all he had left of love in this. "She can stay," he said finally, and withdrew without another word, his heavy boots echoing down the hall. That first night, Claire was lodged in the room that had once belonged to a French governess who had worked on the ranch years before, teaching etiquette and French to the late Mary Elizabeth. The room was small but comfortable, with a narrow iron bed, a dark wooden wardrobe, a desk by the window, and a crucifix on the wall. The scent of candle wax and long-stored linens enveloped her in a cold embrace. Everything was clean, but there was that air of abandonment, of a place that hadn't been inhabited for years. The wind whistled through the ill-fitting window panes and made the floorboards creak. Outside, the chirping of crickets blended with the distant lowing of cattle and the muffled barking of the dogs guarding the property. A maid brought her a basin of warm water, soap, and clean towels. "You can wash up and rest, ma'am," said the young woman, a kind-eyed young woman of color. "Dinner will be served shortly." Claire thanked her with a nod. When she was alone, she sat on the edge of the bed and finally let the tears fall, covering her mouth with her hands to make no sound. From fear, from uncertainty. How had her life gone so wrong? What was she going to do now? How would she return home, empty-handed? She took the blue ribbon from her pocket and clutched it to her chest. "Mother," she murmured, "I don't know what the Lord wants from me, but I promise I will have faith." After washing and changing her clothes, she ate dinner alone in her room. The food was simple but plentiful: roast beef, mashed potatoes, green beans, cornbread, and gravy. She ate everything, for she was ravenous after days of travel, eating only stale bread and fruit. Afterward, she lay down on the narrow bed. The mattress was firm. The sheets smelled of lavender. She tried to sleep, but sleep wouldn't come. She lay looking at the ceiling, thinking, how could someone have mistaken the ranch? Could the letters have been swapped at the post office? Fate played a trick on her, or could it be, as the girl had said, some kind of divine providence? Next day, walking through the fields early in the morning, she'd discovered that the place breathed a silent and melancholic beauty. The ancient fig trees stretched their twisted branches like the arms of ancient sages who had seen the world change many times over. The damp cattle pen exuded the smell of wet earth and fresh manure. The kitchen, located in an annex to the main house, was stuffy and smelled of baked bread and wood smoke. There were chickens scratching in the yard, pigs grunting in their sty, cows being milked by workers who toiled in silence. Everything there seemed to function like a well-oiled machine, each piece in its place, each person knowing exactly what to do. Claire observed everything with curiosity. She came from a family of farmers. She knew field work well. She didn't feel out of place there, despite the size of the property. One of the cooks, a plump black woman with an easy laugh named Joanna, offered her coffee with cornbread. "Sit here." "Child, you must be lost." Claire sat and gratefully accepted the coffee. "I am, ma'am. I don't know what to do." Joanna gave a sympathetic smile. "God knows what He's doing, my child. Trust Him." It was these simple words that gave Claire the strength to continue. The rancher, Arthur Thompson, began to observe her, first from afar, hidden behind half-open doors or windows overlooking the inner courtyard, then with a more contained, but impossible to disguise, interest. There was something about that young woman that intrigued him. She didn't behave like someone who had come looking for advantages. She didn't assert herself, didn't demand anything, didn't complain about the situation. In the following days, Arthur noticed that Claire helped the servants without being asked. She carried buckets of water from the well to the kitchen, even though her hands were too delicate for heavy labor. She swept the porch of the main house every morning, even before the sun had fully risen. She mended torn clothes for the kitchen staff, using the little thread she had brought in her luggage. She had no airs of superiority, even though she was treated as a guest and not as a servant. She ate in the kitchen with the others, laughed at Joanna's jokes, listened to the laundress's stories. She integrated into the ranch's routine as if she had always belonged there. Servants, initially suspicious, began to like her. The young lady has a good heart. She's not stuck up, not. One afternoon, while walking through the halls of the main house looking in for lesson time, Arthur heard laughter coming from his daughter's room. He approached the half-open door with silent steps and peeked through the gap. Claire was sitting on the edge of Mary Ann's bed, teaching the little girl to embroider. There was an embroidery hoop between them, with a white linen handkerchief stretched. Claire held the girl's delicate hand, guiding the needle with infinite patience. "Like this, see? You pull slow. Stitch needs to be even," she explained. Her voice soft. Mary Ann, with her tongue between her teeth in intense concentration, followed the instructions. When she finally managed to make a perfect stitch, she clapped her hands and laughed. "I did it! Look, Claire, I did it!" "Yes, you did. It's beautiful. Your mother would be proud." The girl stopped smiling for a moment. Her big eyes filled with tears, but they were good tears, of someone remembering fondly and not with pain. "Did Mommy embroider too?" she asked softly. "Your father told me she did, and that she was very talented." "Do you think she sees us from up there?" Claire pulled the girl into a hug. "I'm sure of it, and I bet she's smiling." Mary Ann hugged her tightly, like someone finding a sister or a mother. "Thank you," she whispered. "No one ever taught me this. Mrs. Euphemia says those things are a waste of time." Arthur, hidden behind the door, saw the whole scene and looked away, his chest tight with memories he thought were dead and buried. Mary Elizabeth also embroidered. She would spend entire afternoons on the porch with her embroidery hoop on her lap, creating flowers and birds on white fabrics. And she also had that affectionate way of teaching, that infinite patience, that tenderness that seemed to heal wounds with just a touch. He moved away in silence, but something inside him began to stir. It was like a rusty door slowly opening, creaking, resisting, but gradually yielding to pressure. Something he thought he had lost forever was beginning to awaken, the hope that life still had beauty to offer. Housekeeper, Mrs. Euphemia, began to harbor a deep and silent losing influence over Arthur and over the administration of the house. Since Mary Elizabeth's death, she had commanded everything with an iron fist. She decided menus, hired and fired servants, managed expenses, controlled the keys to all pantries and cupboards. She was, in practice, in charge, and she liked it. Claire's presence threatened this power. Euphemia saw how the master looked at the young woman, saw how Mary Ann grew attached to her, and this infuriated her. One day, while stirring a huge pot of caramel in the kitchen, Euphemia began to spread poison among the servants. "That girl's a cunning one. You'll see," she said, looking around to make sure Claire wasn't nearby. "She came on purpose, knowing the master is a widower and has means. She's after the inheritance." The laundresses, who were folding clothes at a nearby table, exchanged uncomfortable glances. "But Mrs. Euphemia," one of them ventured, "the young lady seems like a good sort. She helps everyone." "Exactly," the housekeeper. "It's all an act. She wants to win everyone over so no one will suspect. But I know these women. I've seen many an adventuress trying to take advantage of rich widowers." The rumor spread like wildfire. In a few days, all the servants were talking. The staff, though they liked Claire and found her kind, began to cast suspicion. They whispered in corners when she passed, looked away, answered in monosyllables when she tried to talk. Claire felt the atmosphere change, but she didn't understand why. Suddenly, the people who had been so welcoming became cold and distant. Joanna, who had always been so affectionate, now barely looked at her. The laundresses, who used to laugh at her stories, now worked in silence when she approached. Loneliness began to weigh heavily. Claire started spending more time alone in her room, sewing in silence, and her trembling hands, basting torn fabrics, seemed to also weave the invisible thread of her resilience. She didn't know what she was being accused of, but she knew something was wrong. One night, sitting alone on the back porch of the house, looked up at the starry sky and murmured a prayer. The stars shone intensely, like diamonds scattered on black velvet. "Mother," she whispered, clutching the blue ribbon between her fingers, "why did the Lord bring me here? I don't understand. I came to marry, but the groom doesn't want me. People do. Where should I go?" The wind gently rustled the leaves, bringing the smell of wet earth and wildflower. There was no audible answer, but Claire felt an inexplicable peace invade her heart. It was as if an invisible voice told her, "Trust." The blue ribbon, her mother's gift, was tied around her wrist. It was all she had from home, all she had of safe and unconditional love. In the following days, Claire continued to help, continued to be kind, continued to pray. She did not defend herself against accusations she didn't even know existed. She simply lived with the silent dignity of someone who trusts in God even when she doesn't understand His ways. And this dignity, little by little, began to win hearts again. Joanna was the first to regret it. One afternoon, she pulled Claire into a corner of the kitchen and said, with tears in her eyes, "Child, forgive me. I let Mrs. Euphemia put doubts in my head, but I know you're a good girl. I know your heart is pure." Claire hugged her. "You don't need to ask for forgiveness, Joanna. I understand." One by one, the other servants also began to trust her again. They saw that she hadn't changed, that she remained the same humble and helpful person as before. And they began to question Mrs. Euphemia's words, but the housekeeper didn't give up. If she couldn't destroy Claire's reputation, she would destroy her presence there another way. One evening, during a formal dinner in the dining room, the tension that had been building became visible and palpable, like a heavy, long mahogany table, polished until it shone like a mirror, stretched under the yellowish light. White porcelain plates with golden rims, solid silver cutlery, cut crystal glasses, everything Mrs. Euphemia absolutely insisted on maintaining. Arthur sat at the head, Mary Ann to his right, Claire to his left. Mrs. Euphemia, who had always dined with the family since the mistress's death, sat near the other end, watching everything with her eagle eyes. The dinner proceeded in heavy silence. Only the clinking of silverware against porcelain broke the quiet. Arthur, tired of the intrigues that reached his ears through the foreman and the administrator, decided to clear things up once and for all. He set down his silverware with a firm, dry clatter that drew everyone's attention. He looked at Claire, who ate in silence, her eyes downcast, her cheeks still flushed with shyness and discomfort, and asked directly, "Tell me, young lady, who sent you?" Silence fell over the table like a heavy stone dropped into a quiet lake. Mrs. Euphemia stopped cutting her meat mid-motion, the knife suspended in the air, attentive like a predator, waiting for the right moment to strike. Mary Ann held her breath, her wide eyes going from Claire to her father. Claire slowly raised her eyes. Her heart was pounding, but she didn't let fear show. Her voice came out firm, clear, but without arrogance or defiance. One destiny, perhaps, or the faith of a child. The silence that followed was more resonant than any words. It weighed like lead, echoed like distant thunder. Mary Ann smiled discreetly, as if she understood everything, as if that answer confirmed something she already knew in her heart. Arthur remained motionless for a long moment, his eyes fixed on Claire. There was something in that answer that disarmed him completely. It wasn't presumption, it wasn't falsehood. It was just faith, pure, simple faith, the kind that moves mountains. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping the floor. Everyone was startled. Without a word, he left the dining room and went to the living room. And then, for the first time in 3 long years, he touched the piano that lay silent in a corner, covered by a white cloth like a shroud. He removed the cloth with trembling hands. Dust rose in golden clouds in the lamplight. The instrument, the German grand piano, was still impeccable under its protection. Arthur sat on the upholstered bench, positioned his fingers over the keys, and began to play. The notes echoed through the halls, soft and melancholic. It was an old waltz, a tune Mary Elizabeth used to play. Arthur's fingers moved with muscle memory, even after so long idle. The music flowed, sad but beautiful, filled with longing, but also with something new. Hope. Claire, still sitting at the table, felt something break inside her, a sense of belonging she had never known in her entire life. It was as if that music said, without words, "You are not a stranger here, you belong." Tears streamed silently down her face. They were not tears of sadness, but of pure emotion. Mary Ann got up and ran to the living room. She stopped at the doorway, watching her father play, and her little face lit up with a radiant smile. It had been so long since she had seen her father play, so long since she had heard music in that house. Mrs. Euphemia, furious and humiliated, left the table prematurely. She stomped loudly to her quarters, her face contorted with rage. She knew she was losing control of the situation. She knew that this intruder was, little by little, winning over the master's and the girl's heart, and that the following days brought subtle but significant twists. Arthur, taken by a restlessness, couldn't explain, ordered an investigation into the letters. He asked the ranch administrator, a literate and meticulous man, to check the post office records in the nearest town, to consult maps of neighboring properties, to look for other ranchers with similar names. The administrator returned 3 days later with a surprising discovery. "Mr. Thompson," he said, unrolling a map on the office desk, "I found the explanation. There's another rancher in the region, about 30 miles from here, named Arthur Miller. His property is also called St. Anthony's Ranch. It's smaller than ours, but the name is identical." Arthur frowned, processing the information. "Miller? Exactly, sir. Your surname is Thompson. His is Miller. At the post office. The letters must have been swapped. It's an understandable mistake." Arthur took the original letters Claire had brought and examined them again. Indeed, the surname was written somewhat illegibly, or a hasty handwriting of someone unaccustomed to writing. It could be Thompson. It could be Miller. "Find out more about this man," he ordered. "I want to know if he actually ordered a bride." The administrator nodded and left again. He returned the next day with more information. I confirmed. Arthur Miller did indeed send for a bride. He is a widower, has a medium-sized ranch, raises cattle. He's been waiting for the young lady for weeks. So it was true. Claire had come to marry another man, and fate, or God, as Mary Ann would say, had brought her to him by mistake. When she learned of the discovery, Claire insisted on leaving immediately. I must go to meet the one who awaits me, she said, her voice. I cannot stay here causing trouble for you and your family. I've already overstayed my welcome. But Mary Ann, upon hearing that Claire intended to leave, fell into despair. She cried profusely, clung tightly to Claire's legs, and pleaded between sobs, "Don't go, please don't go. Daddy needs you. I need you too. You can't leave. You were sent to us." The scene broke the hearts of everyone present. The maids watching had tears in their eyes. Even Joanna, always so strong, had to turn away to hide her emotion. Arthur tried to maintain reason, saying that the right, the honorable, the morally appropriate thing was to return her to her original destiny. But his voice no longer carried conviction. The words came out weak, hesitant. If he himself didn't go. Claire has commitments. She has a family waiting for her. She has a man who paid for the marriage. "But I don't want her to go," the girl cried, hugging Claire even tighter. "God sent her to us, Daddy. Don't you understand? She's the answer to my prayers." Claire knelt in front of the girl and cupped her tear-streaked face between her hands. "My dear, you are a sweetheart, but I can't. It wouldn't be right. Your father is right." "Then take me with you," Mary Ann pleaded. "Please, I don't want to stay here without you." Arthur's restless heart betrayed. He knew, deep in his soul, that Claire had brought something back to the house, something precious he thought he had lost forever. She had brought life. She had brought warmth. She had brought music. The house breathed differently since she arrived. Mary Ann smiled again, laughed again, and he himself felt his heart beat differently, faster, more alive. "I will send her safely," he said finally, his voice heavy. "I will prepare a carriage with guards. But if it is your wish to stay a few more days, until everything is properly resolved, until I can speak with this man and explain the situation." Claire looked into his eyes. There was something there, an unspoken question, an unconfessed desire. "Not an inconvenience?" "It's not an inconvenience," Arthur said quickly, revealing more than he intended. Mary Ann hugged Claire with all her might, smiling through tears. "Thank you, Daddy. Thank you." Deep down, neither of them, neither Claire nor Arthur, wanted her to leave, but neither of them dared to admit it aloud. Mrs. Euphemia, seeing the growing danger of losing her place of power and influence, plotted in silence. She needed to act fast before it was too late. She secretly summoned the true suitor, Arthur Miller, sending him an urgent letter via a private messenger. In the letter, written in neat handwriting and carefully chosen words, she stated that his fiancée was being held at the neighboring ranch, that she was being seduced by the property owner, and that he needed to come get her immediately before the situation became even more complicated. The man, vain and possessive, felt outraged. What did she mean his fiancée was at another ranch? Why was she taking so long to arrive? He mounted the fastest black horse he had and set off immediately, boiling with rage. He arrived 3 days later at noon, when the sun was high and merciless. He was older than Claire expected. He must have been about 45, maybe 50. His face was weathered by the sun, deep wrinkles around his eyes, thinning gray hair. He wore cowboy clothes, leather chaps, a sweaty cotton shirt, a leather hat. He had a hard, almost cruel gaze, and spoke too loudly, like someone accustomed to giving orders and being obeyed without question. When he entered the main parlor of the ranch, without even asking permission or greeting properly, he simply said in a harsh voice, "Where's the girl who belongs to me?" The word "belongs" Arthur's blood boiled instantly. He was in the office when he heard the rough voice coming from the parlor. He stood up, adjusted his vest, and went to meet the unwelcome visitor. "Good day," Arthur said, his voice icy and controlled. "And you are?" "Arthur Miller," the man replied, taking off his hat but without any real courtesy. "I've come for my fiancée." "Your fiancée?" Arthur raised an eyebrow. "Here, no one belongs to anyone here, sir. Miss Claire is free to decide what she wants to do." The man gave a dry, humorless laugh. "Free? She came to marry me. I paid the dowry, made the agreement with her family. She has no choice. She's mine." Arthur felt rage rise like hot lava. He clenched his fists. but maintained his composure. "You'll have to speak with her then. Claire," he called. Claire, who was in the garden with Marianne picking flowers, heard the call and came running. When she entered the parlor and saw the man, she stopped at the threshold of the door. Her heart pounded. So it was him, her future husband. He examined her from head to toe, like someone evaluating cattle in a pen. His eyes swept over her body without respect. Claire felt dirty, violated by his gaze alone. "Is that you?" he asked, his voice tinged with disappointment. "I expected someone more robust, but she'll do. Come on, get your things. We're wasting time." Claire felt her blood boil. The humiliation, the disrespect, the arrogance, everything exploded within her like a burst dam. She took a step forward, raised her chin, and said, with a clear, firm voice, "I do have a choice, and I choose not to marry you, sir." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the birds outside seemed to stop singing. The man turned red, the vein in his forehead throbbing, his eyes almost bulging out of their sockets. "How dare you refuse me?" he cried, taking a threatening step forward. "Your family has already received the dowry. Owe me this marriage." "Then return the dowry," Claire replied. "My family will find a way to pay, but I will not be merchandise traded between hands of pride and greed." The man tried to advance, his face contorted with fury, his hand raised as if to strike her. But Arthur stepped between them with lightning speed, grabbing the man's wrist in midair. "Do not touch what you do not understand," he said, his voice low but laden with authority and ill-contained menace. "Do not dare raise a hand to her, not in my house." Two men stood face to face, measuring each other's strength. Arthur was taller, stronger, younger. The other realized he would gain no advantage in a physical confrontation. "You'll regret this," he spat, yanking his arm away. "I'll sue. I'll go to the police. I'll make sure you pay for this affront." "Do what you wish," Arthur said with deadly calm, "but leave my property now, before I lose my patience." Marianne watched everything from behind the stairs, her hands clasped as if praying for a miracle, her eyes wide, her heart pounding. She had never seen her father like this, so strong, so protective, so alive. The man spat on the floor, a gesture of absolute contempt, and stomped out. "This isn't over," he shouted, before mounting his black horse and galloping off, raising clouds of red dust. When he vanished from sight, Claire felt her legs go weak. The adrenaline that had sustained her during the confrontation suddenly drained away, and she almost fell, firm but gentle. "You all right?" he asked. Claire nodded, but she was ending me. "No need to thank me," he said. His eyes said much more than his words. That night the sky opened up in heavy rain, as if the heavens reflected the emotional storm that had happened that. The main house smelled of wet wood and melting water. The windows rattled with the strong wind, and lightning illuminated the fields like flashes of memory, turning everything black and white, for thunder rumbled so loudly the walls shake. The rain fell in heavy curtains, drumming on the tiled roof, filling the gutters, overflowing through the downspouts. Arthur couldn't sleep. He paced back and forth in his study, his mind agitated. Sending Claire from that rude man was the right thing. That he had. No, now what? What if the really went to the police? What if he caused trouble? Worse than all that, what did he feel for Claire? He could no longer deny it. He could no longer pretend it was just hospitality, just Christian kindness. It was more than that. It was much more. He found himself thinking of her all the time, searching for her with his eyes in the hallways, smiling when he heard her light laugh coming from the garden. Was it right? She had come to marry another man. She was there by mistake. Wouldn't it be taking advantage on his part? Wouldn't it be dishonest? He sought counsel from the only source he trusted. He went to Mary Ann's room. The girl was awake, sitting in bed clutching a rag doll, watching the storm through the window. "Can't you sleep?" Arthur asked, sitting on the edge of the bed. "I'm scared Claire will leave," the girl confessed. "Daddy, you can't let her go." "Daughter, it's not that simple." "It is too," Marianne interrupted, with the absolute certainty of children. Daddy, I pray every night since Mommy went to heaven. I pray for God to send someone to take care of us. And he sent Claire. I know it was him. I feel it in my heart. Arthur felt his eyes sting. Do you really think so? I'm sure of it. And you like her? Daddy, I see it. You smile when she's near. You started playing the piano again. She is alive again. Arthur hugged his daughter, holding her tightly against his chest. You are too wise for your age. Don't let her leave. Please. After putting Marianne to sleep, Arthur decided to look for Claire. He needed to talk to her, clear things up. He needed to know what she felt, what she wanted. He found her on the back porch, sheltered from the storm by the roof. She was sitting in a rocking chair, glowing by the dim light of a kerosene lamp. Her face was serene, her hands calmly moving the needle with automatic precision. Even with the storm outside, she seemed at peace. Claire, he called softly so as not to startle her. She looked up and smiled faintly. Mr. Thompson, can't you sleep either? No. He approached, his hands in his pockets, uncomfortable. We need to talk. I know. She placed her sewing on her lap. I'm leaving tomorrow. I've caused enough trouble. No, he said, too quickly, and then composed himself. It's not about that, or rather, it is, but I don't know what to make of you. Claire looked at him with those calm brown eyes. Then do nothing, she replied, without raising her voice. Sometimes what God wants is just for us to stay, to wait, to trust. At that instant, thunder rumbled in the distance, shaking the walls of the house. A flash of lightning illuminated Claire's face, making her almost ethereal, like an angel in the midst of the storm. And he understood. Her presence was not a coincidence, not a mail error, not chance. It was a restoration. It was God giving him back something he thought he had lost, capacity to love, to feel, to live. Stay, Cotton, stay, he whispered, his voice hoarse with emotion. Please, stay here with us. Claire felt her heart pound. Do you mean? Not as an employee? Not as a guest? He took a step forward, his eyes fixed on hers. Stay as part of the family. Let me get to know who you are. Let us see where this goes. Tears filled Claire's eyes. But I came to marry another man. It wouldn't be right. That man doesn't deserve you, Arthur said with conviction. I saw how he looked at you, how he treated you, like a thing, not a person. That's not marriage. Slavery. What you offer me is different. Yes, he replied. I offer respect. I offer the chance to choose. I'm not asking you to marry me now. I'm just asking you to stay, to give us the chance to truly know you, and for you to know us, too. They stood there, side by side, listening to the rainfall. The sound was deafening, yet comforting. Neither of them needed to say anything more. There was a silent understanding between them, as if their souls had known each other for a long time, as if they had been family in another life. I'll stay, Claire said finally, her voice low but firm. I'll stay and see what God has planned. Arthur felt a joy explode in his chest, so intense it hurt. He almost took her hand, almost pulled her into an embrace, but he restrained himself. It was still early. There was still much to be built. I thank you, he simply said. And there, on the porch, under the storm, something new began. Next morning, Mrs. Euphemia was dismissed. Arthur called her into his study early, even before breakfast. The woman entered with an air of superiority, expecting some kind of consultation about the day's chores, but what she heard left her white as a sheet. You rendered good services here for years, Arthur said, voice firm and formal. You managed the house efficiently after my wife's death. I am grateful for that. I cannot tolerate intrigues and malice within my home. I cannot accept that you spread lies about innocent people. Innocence. Sir, I don't know what you're talking about. Don't insult me. He can know it was you who called that man. I know you spread rumors about Claire. The servants told me everything. The woman grew even paler. I was only protecting the interests of the house. Interests of the house, Arthur, bitter irony, or your own. I will pay you fair severance and give you a letter of recommendation. But I need you to leave today. by noon. Euphemia tried to argue, to plead, to promise she would change, but he remained unyielding, standing behind the desk, arms crossed, his gaze hard. By noon, he repeated. The woman left the study furious, but she knew there was no point in insisting. Packed her bags, crying with rage and humiliation. The maids helped her in silence, without pity. They all knew of the malicious things she had done. When the carriage that would take her away finally departed, raising dust on the road, Mary Ann ran through the hall shouting with joy, "The witch is gone! The witch is gone!" Arthur gently reprimanded her. "Hustja, Mary Ann, it's not nice to call anyone a witch, but she was mean, Daddy." Perhaps she was, but she still deserves respect. The girl pouted, but nodded. Then she ran to Claire, who was helping Joanna in the kitchen, and hugged her around the waist. "Now you can stay forever. The house is yours." Claire stayed, not as a fiancée or servant, but as part of that family's destiny. Slowly, without haste, but with naturalness, she began to take on small. He helped organize the pantry, tended the garden with dedication, taught Mary Ann embroidery and sewing, prepared home remedies when someone fell. The servants, who had previously mistrusted her due to Euphemia's influence, now genuinely respected and loved her. Saw that she had no ulterior motives, that her heart was truly kind, that she treated everyone with dignity, regardless of social position. "That young lady has a heart of gold," Joanna would say to anyone who would listen. "She's a blessing in the lives of that man and that girl." Weeks passed. The relationship between Claire and Arthur deepened slowly. Walks through the fields under the dinners where Mary Ann observed them with knowing mischievous smile. Claire came to know every corner of the ranch, vast crop fields that stretched as far as the eye could see, the pastures where the cattle lowed at dawn, the pond where the workers fished on Sundays, the old chapel where the family prayed on Sundays. One day, while riding across the property to check the fences, Arthur told her about his deceased wife in more detail than he had ever shared with anyone. Mary Elizabeth was too delicate for this world, he said, looking at the horizon. She had a poet's soul, lived in the clouds. When we lost the baby, she simply gave up. She stopped eating, stopped smiling, stopped living. She withered away slowly, like a plant without water. I tried everything, called doctors, ministers, even faith healers. Nothing helped. She had already decided she wanted to leave. Claire listened in silence, respecting his pain, giving him space to share his story. "I felt helpless," he continued, his voice cracking. "I couldn't save her. I couldn't make her want to stay. I wasn't enough." "Did what you could," Claire said softly. "Sometimes the pain is too great, and it's no one's fault." Arthur looked at her, grateful for her understanding. "But you," he continued, his eyes fixed on hers, "you have a different kind of strength, a serene strength, one that doesn't need to shout to be noticed. You face storms with faith. That is admirable." Claire felt her heart accelerate. The compliment caught her off guard. She didn't respond with words, but smiled faintly, and that smile said more than 1,000 speeches. At night, when Arthur returned to playing the piano, now regularly, every night before bed, the echo of the notes blended with Mary Ann's light laughter playing in the garden, with the murmur of Claire's prayers in her room, with the silent certainty that sometimes love arrives disguised as a mistake, but recognizes the heart that awaits it. A few weeks later, on a sunny October afternoon when the goldenrod covered the ground like a golden carpet, Arthur asked Claire to marry him. It wasn't grand. There were no expensive jewels or elaborate speeches. It was simple, true, the way it had to be. They were in the garden, Claire pruning rose bushes while Arthur pretended to be checking nearby fences, but actually just wanted to be near her. Mary Ann played with a doll under the shade of the fig tree. Suddenly, Arthur stopped pretending and went straight to the point. "Claire, you brought light back into this house. To me and to my daughter. I don't know what destiny planned. I don't know if it was God or luck or chance, but I know I want you by my side forever." Will you marry me? Claire dropped the pruning shears, her hands trembling. She looked at him with tears in her eyes, tears of joy, of relief, of love. Yes, she said, her voice choked with emotion. Yes, I will. Mary Ann, who had been peeking from afar, eagerly waiting for this moment, shouted with joy so loudly it startled the birds in the trees. She ran to hug them, laughing and jumping. I knew it. I knew Jesus sent her to us. The three stood there, embracing in the garden, while the wind rustled the flowers and the sun illuminated everything with that golden late afternoon light. The servants, who observed discreetly from the house windows, celebrated too. Joanna cried with emotion in the kitchen. The mistaken letter, the one Claire kept inside a prayer book as a memento, came to symbolize the mysterious thread that connects what seemed disconnected. The mistake that turned into a blessing. The error that revealed itself as providence. Preparations for the wedding were made with joy. Claire sewed her own dress, simple but beautiful, linen with delicate embroidery. On her wrist, she tied her mother's blue ribbon. They sent letters to Claire's family in the Appalachian Hollow, inviting them to the ceremony and offering to pay all travel expenses. Claire's mother arrived a week early, crying with emotion at seeing her daughter so happy. Her father, still ill, but insisting on coming, also came. The younger siblings ran around the ranch, amazed by the size of the place. Arthur returned the dowry to the other rancher, Arthur Miller, with a polite letter explaining the situation and apologizing for the inconvenience. The man accepted the money back, grumbling, but didn't cause any more trouble. When the wedding day arrived, held in the ranch chapel on a sunny November morning, Claire wore her mother's blue ribbon on her wrist. The simple dress made her beautiful, radiant. Her face shone with happiness. The ceremony was simple, but moving. The town minister came especially to perform the marriage. All the servants attended, deeply touched, dressed in their Sunday best. Joanna cried from beginning to end. The laundresses sobbed, even the foreman, a tough man, discreetly wiped the corners of his eyes. Mary Ann held the hem of Claire's dress as flower girl, serious and focused on her mission. She wore a pink dress with a white bow in her hair, and when the minister asked if Arthur accepted Claire as his wife, he responded with a firm, clear voice that echoed through the chapel walls. I do, and I thank God for the mistake that united us. Everyone laughed, emotional. It was true. A mistake that had become the greatest blessing. Claire, the minister asked, do you accept Arthur as your husband? I do, she replied, her voice trembling with emotion. Forever. When the minister declared them husband and wife, Arthur kissed Claire softly, respect and love. Those present applauded and shouted congratulations. Mary Ann jumped for joy. Claire's mother cried, embracing her husband. After the ceremony, the celebration lasted all afternoon. There was music, dancing, abundant food. They roasted a pig, prepared mountains of mashed potatoes and green beans, salads, and pies. Everyone ate and drank until they could eat no more. Arthur hired local musicians who played lively country and folk tunes. The servants danced, the guests danced, even the minister danced. The joy was contagious, pure, genuine. Claire, now a wife and stepmother, finally felt at home. Completely at home. That place, those people, were her destiny. They always were. She just needed to find her way. At night, when everyone had retired and the ranch finally fell silent, she and Arthur stood on the porch, looking at the stars that shone like diamonds in the dark sky. Really believe it was God who sent you? He asked, holding her from behind. I do, she replied, leaning her head against his cheek. Because only God could turn such a mistake into such a great blessing. Only He could use a mixed-up letter to bring me exactly where I always belonged. He pulled her closer and kissed her again, now with more passion, with more surrender. And in that moment, under the stars, with the gentle breeze rustling the trees and the scent of jasmine in the air, everything made sense. Destiny, the mistake, the blue ribbon, the girl who whispered about Jesus. The piano that played again. All were pieces of a divine puzzle that finally fit together perfectly. And they lived. They lived with love, with faith, with joy. Mary Ann grew up strong and happy, loved by two devoted parents. The ranch prospered under the couple's joint management, and every night, without fail, Arthur played the piano while Claire embroidered and Mary Ann played on the living room rug. The house was alive again. Love had returned, and all because of a mistaken letter that arrived at exactly the right place. And so ends the story of Claire and Arthur, a love born of error but affirmed in truth and faith. A story that teaches us that not everything that seems wrong truly is, that God works in mysterious ways, and that destiny sometimes needs to push us to the right place, even if we don't understand at first. If this narrative touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and comment below what you thought of this incredible story. Your interaction helps us continue bringing stories that move, transform, and make us believe in true love. Share with those you love, with those who need to believe that miracles still happen. Until the next story, and may God bless your journey.